Action, it says your hair.
My hair is too nice, huh? Just stay here for a minute. People piling in?
Yep.
Who's here? Anybody
Bunch of
interested?
people.
Huh?
I don't know. You probably know them more than I do.
Hey everybody, Sunday, the 3 o'clock live session. I'm going to turn a bowl on the pole lathe. So I just thought I would start with the beginning of the process. A lot of times we skip over this, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the wood and material, and then I'm going to break it down with a couple tools, electric chainsaw and axe. If anybody has any questions, just ask, and hopefully we can get to them. Jasmine's on the camera, and she'll read out the questions as they come in. So we're gonna be here about an hour of this. All right. So the other day we were at the municipal transfer station for brush and stuff, and we found what I think is Norway maple. And it's a really nice wood to turn. So I brought a couple chunks home, and I just cut a piece off just to see what I have here. And so, that's what we're looking at. And if you want to zoom in here, Jasmine, you can see this misshapen log, and it has to do with the way it grew. Of course, trees don't just grow in perfect circles. And one of the things you might notice is this dark heart, which I'm not too worried about. Kind of a soft pith there, but you can see the distance from center to each side is quite a bit different. And we call that reaction wood. So there's really tight rings here and really big rings here. It's not that big of a deal, but it will mean that there's some extra stresses in the material, especially if we were going to take a board or make something from a section here. We have this tight rings and big rings, and so there's going to be a lot of strange things happening. Maybe unpredictable for me to decide what might happen, but I definitely know something's probably going to happen. But for bowl turning, we tend to just cut half.
Eric Foss is on, Aaron Snyder, and
Cool.
some other people.
Hey guys, the Portland, Oregon, or the Oregon crew. So I want to separate the two halves, keeping the pith along the center of the width, so that when the bowl warps, it warps relatively even from side to side. So I'm going to get a bowl from here. And I might get a shallow bowl here if I wanted to. I don't really make too many shallow bowls. They kind of warp funny, I think, so. But that's how we're going to do it. And the other thing I see is there's a little crack here. You won't be able to see it on the camera maybe, but I just penciled it in. When I originally cut this, it didn't have a crack. And you can see this is the offcut, there's no crack. So that still has to do with that stress that's there. And it also sort of reveals kind of what happens when we're turning and what we want to do with our material. Generally with woodworking, is to take the pith away, because that's where the cracks generate from. And there's a lot of reasons for that I'm not going to get into right now. I'm guessing this doesn't go deep, so I'm going to accommodate by cutting a little extra off its length. okay. So the other thing we want to look at, you know, there's knots. There's a little knot there. So we'll see what happens. I'm gonna cut into it. I got a pile of this wood, so. Hearing protection. Eye protection. I lost my other glasses. I don't know where they went. Maybe you want to be over here, Jess. I don't know if you can see. Right there, maybe. So, looking at that end, I'm looking for that little crack. Looks like there might be a little bit of it there. So hopefully I can turn that away, but I'm gonna cut there, and I don't think I'm gonna make a bowl from that because it's too small. So I have a width here. That's the max.
This is Norway maple?
I believe Norway maple, yeah. So I'm going to measure the maximum width it could be, for, remembering not to include the bark. And then cut it to length. A lot of times I'll do the chainsaw work outside with a gas powered saw, but in the winter I use this electric chainsaw, and it works pretty nice. Of course you can just split as well, but making those long cross cuts on large diameter logs is quite challenging with hand saws. Alright, I'm going to set up, I have a groove in this log so that I can set up and rip the log. Or I could also split it, but I'm going to rip it because if you split, you go with the fibers, and sometimes that will reduce the potential size of the bowl you can make, and I want to max it out. So something that you might notice is the long shavings that are coming out. When you're ripping logs, you really want to run your saw blade parallel to the length. If you're using a chainsaw in particular, if you try to go on the end, you're going to be cutting straight in or completely perpendicular to the end grain, and it's just not going to work very good. And before I sever it, I'm going to make a flat area here as well, so that I can cut it out of my bandsaw. nice looking wood. Yeah, it's too bad the reaction would create such a small little bowl. This is really warp funny, meaning that the rim will just really tuck down and the bowl will almost look, it'll look distorted in a really funny way. So maybe good for spoons. So the next thing is to make sure that you set up your compass. I tend to prefer that center point to be in line with the center of the tree. You know, not off to the side, because when the bowl warps, it won't be even from side to side. So the electric lathe, I would mark that spot for drilling the hole in that little screw chuck. But for the pole lathe, I'm going to run a smaller diameter mark so that it'll help me line up my mandrel. Okay. So we're looking at this blank here. You know, now I'm thinking about the design that I want to make. This is quite a big diameter for the thickness or the height of the bowl. It might be wise of me to reflect on what kind of bowl shape I want to make. And knowing what I know about what I like, I'm going to make a little steeper bowl instead of a big shallow bowl. Maybe I'm changing my mind. I want to show people about nesting too, so maybe that shallower bowl would be better for nest. But the point is, on a pole lathe, because the turning is happening so slowly, you want to really think out what you're trying to make so that you don't turn away a lot of material. But you don't want to limit your bowl design by a bowl blank that's too big than what you want. You know, if that makes sense or not, I'm not sure. I'm going to bandsaw this out, so it's going to be loud. Now, of course, I could use the axe to axe away.
Aaron wants to know, would you mark the smaller circle if you are using a mandrel with a tenon?
No, because the tenon, you're drilling a hole, so you just need that center point. You know, so if we were just axing away, you know, you'd come down like so and axe away all four corners, and then I'm going to do axing on this on the other sides, but you get the idea. It's pretty straightforward. Axe. A lot of people don't realize that when I started pole lathe turning, I owned a bandsaw, and so I bandsawed out all my bowls, and then later on I got rid of my shop with all my electric tools and just went hand tools only, and then just did them by hand, or I did them with a chainsaw. So another way of doing it without the axe is you can cut in with your chainsaw here, here. But you can see the wane, the bark side. All of this, that's going to be your bowl. So we need to get rid of all of this extra material here and here. The bandsaw really can't do that. So we'll go in the other room, grab axe, and chop it up. Maybe you want to be straight on, I don't know, a little closer too. So, I know a lot of you have done axe work before, but the height of the block is pretty critical. If it's too high, you can't extend your arms all the way. And if it's too low, you're going to be hunched over and you're gonna cause your back strain. And let's see here, I'm going to move this out just so you can see it a bit more. So I'm going to take my axe. The axe is going to cut best if it's parallel to the fibers, and it's going to be harder to cut if it's completely perpendicular, especially when we come across all this end grain coming down like so. That's going to be the hardest cut there is. So anytime that I can skew the blade is going to give me a little bit of an advantage. So instead of coming straight down, I'm going to turn the bowl blank and come at it on an angle. And I'm being very mindful that if I were to miss, where's the axe going to go? Is it going to miss the block? If I'm standing with a wide stance, am I going to hit myself in the leg? To be really safe, because the axe, we put a lot of force into the axe, making bowl blanks. And what might be hard to see on the camera is that my thumb is very safe. I'm not going to be carving anywhere near it. But when you're looking at it from this view, you might not notice. And again, I'm turning it so that it's almost parallel. This could be where we have conversations about the shape of your axe, the size of the blade or bit, and so on. This longer curved blade allows for more slicing. And a little bit heavier axe as well will work through that end grain areas. We could do this with a chainsaw too, like I said. Watch your eyes, Jasmine.
Watch your phone.
One time I was filming and I hit Silas, my son, in the eye. Just like, perfect. Boom, ah! It wasn't live, but it was. So you can see now what's happening here. I've carved away these sides, but still that end grain area, it's been reduced, which will allow for a little easier of a time. And again, if I go straight at or completely perpendicular, it's going to be harder compared to if I were to just go on the sides a little bit more, make some more facets.
Is your axe single bevel?
No, it's a double bevel. I used to use single bevel axes for mostly carpentry work and straight work. It would work good for this, but the double bevels are what I have for random use. So now I've carved these facets, and we can kind of check to see if this curve matches this curve, and also this area, this band, if that's fairly even. then we know there's not going to be too many high spots that we're going to have to turn down. Pole lathe turning, as some of you know, it takes a lot of time to take down any inconsistencies. So it's important to do a good, accurate job when you're roughing out your blanks. And for more power, I'm using this part of the edge, not this part. That's more power because it's closer to my hand, especially in that end grain area. And I'm slowly dropping the bowl as I carve. In Robin Wood's book, if you guys don't have it, it'd be worth getting if you're into pole lathe turning. It's a history of wooden bowls in the UK, England I think in particular, but it touches on a bunch of European stuff. He talks about pole lathe turners who would spend almost as much time axing out the blank as it would to turn it. What's that for? What were you doing? That's not bad. That'll work. So there's two ways of fixing this bowl to the lathe. We can't wrap the drive strap around the bowl. We need to add a mandrel. So you have a spike mandrel or a tenon mandrel. Now the tenon, you drill a hole and hammer it in, and it would have to be a snug, tight fit because you don't want the connection to move, because that would change your axis orientation, and then you'd have to return the bowl. And there's a gearing that we have to think about. So the smaller the mandrel, the faster it spins per pump. And the RPMs is the same. Rotations is constant as if we're constant. But the diameter of the mandrels and the diameter of the bowls will change as they increase or decrease in size. And so we're looking for a relationship. I think it's about 1/3. You want the mandrel about 1/3, give or take even a 1/2 inch. And what that'll do is allow for torque So, or power. So the larger the mandrel, the more power we have when we push down. But it's not going to be rotating. The difference is going to be too equal. And so we'll have a lot of torque, but we won't have a lot of velocity, or it's measured in a different distance, kind of like miles per hour, the distance along the surface compared to the RPMs. So smaller mandrel, this bowl will spin faster in relation to the mandrel, but will have less power. And so you'll have to figure out that on your own as you turn.
Let's see the mandrel for a minute.
This one was, this one has an extra long spike because the other one broke and I had to replace it really quick. Here's a better one. You're gonna want them to be equal. And something to think about. All they are, if you want to zoom in on that, they're just a small piece of rod, mild steel rod, hammered flat and ground. And then the base is, if you can grind these flat, that's nice too. And then you just drill a hole, and then just slightly undersized, and then you hammer them in. And then you can adjust with a pair of pliers. You can adjust them so that they're parallel. This one's all cracked up. Once you hammer that into your bowl, those two pieces of metal, they can't spin independent of each other. And so you don't need to do anything. You don't need to glue them. You don't need to screw them in. They just sit in there. Sometimes they come out. You have to, fish them out, put them back in. So now that original mark comes in handy because I can look straight down. Are you catching that? I can look straight down the mandrel, and I can see if I need to move it around to get it to fit, because I want this lined up as perfectly as I can to center. And when you're hammering it in, gentle. Give that wood time to stretch and compress a little bit. If you hammer too quick, you could split. If your spikes are too thick, you could split. It depends on the species as well.
Okay, a couple questions. Mm-hmm. Do you prefer spiked mandrels over tenon mandrels?
Personally, I like the spike mandrel because it allows some flexibility. If something were to go wrong, I can adjust like this. And if I do nesting bowls, I can take it off quite quickly and switch it to a smaller mandrel.
And then
like that for the core.
The other question was, do you try to orient the spikes parallel to the grain?
They're parallel to the grain, yes. Or slightly off parallel, depending on species and how your spikes work. It depends. You have to kind of figure that out. The worst thing you can have is this to come loose while you're turning, because then your axis is changed. So you don't want to be over here, Jasmine.
Mm-hmm. 30 minutes.
Yeah, we're going to shut this off. If we go past, we'll shut it off and we'll just fire it back up again. So anyway, we need to mount this between the centers. So before I put the drive strap on, I'm gonna push the tailstock against and give it a spin. And what I'm looking for is this mandrel to spin evenly, parallel to the axis. That's pretty good. I left my hammer. Make your mark. You know, if it looked like this, that's not acceptable. There's a lot of problems that happen, especially when you're beginning, if you don't get your mandrel parallel. So spend the time to get it, figure it out. And then I have a sharpened Phillips screwdriver that I use to just bore that hole a little bit. Now I can wrap the drive strap around. Tighten it up. The humidity's changed in here since the last time I used it, so I wanted to make sure this was tight.
Derek.
What did Eric say?
Derek said,
Oh, Derek.
only person I know who sharpens a Phillips head screwdriver.
Derek Broadbender?
Yes. Okay,
Okay.
what did you just do?
I put a little vegetable oil on. The mandrel's a little squeaky. You don't have to do that if it's not squeaky. But mine's squeaky. All right. I got a bunch of new books here to try out too. Quite curious about. I'll save this. So the main thing is when you're turning with the pull lathe, you're using hooks, and hooks cut on pivot. You can't slide the tool along. You can a little bit, but it's in extreme circumstances. Just erase that from your mind for now. And on the tool rest, we lock it down, and then we cut on a pivot. So where do you place the tool's edge along the surface of the wood so that you can get a decent pivot, a decent distance of cut with the pivot? And then for adjusting, you're going to be turning the tool counterclockwise or clockwise, depending on the shape of the scroll, the shape of the metal and the scroll of the hook. So you're going to want to be cutting slightly skew along the surface at about 10 degrees or so, give or take. Just under the surface that's spinning, you know, maybe an 1/8 inch. You can go a little bit more. Of course, you can go less for finish cuts. And so you have to figure out where the highest point is as it's spinning. Set your pivot point up to cut on the arc, and you're going to hold your tool, you know, like so, a football hold, or underneath your arm. When you're beginning, a lot of people have seen videos of me or other people turning, and they're turning like this. Okay, that's for when you have more experience. It's like riding your bike without your hands on the handlebars. It's similar. You can do it. You know, it doesn't take much, but you have to practice. And there's too much movement in this grip when you're starting. It's very important to keep your tool only cutting on a pivot. You're only pivoting, and you're not pushing the tool into the wood at all. Because the surface is lumpy and bumpy in this way as it spins. If you push, your tool's going to cut in and out, and it's just going to be tossed all over the place, and you're not going to be able to make very good cuts. And in fact, it'll create such an ununiform surface that you'll have a hard time even finishing the outside bowl at all without fixing it. So the best thing to do is to set your pivots up and make your pivot, and if it's not deep enough, then readjust, do it again until you can start cutting wood and then start working on the surface. So you might want to stand here.
Or behind you, perhaps?
I don't know if there's room,
Okay.
but maybe you can reach.
And then is that light for you? Or?
It's whoever wants it.
Oh yeah, this is okay,
Yeah.
I think.
And I think a lot of people are going to be interested in what's going on right here, Jasmine.
Okay.
At the very tip of the tool. They don't need to see me or anything else. They're going to want to zoom in on that. So.
Okay.
So that type of position with the hook, does everybody see that? The hook is laying parallel, the edge. That's going to catch. It's going to be horrible. You're not going to be able to make a cut. You're going to, you just can't. If you're completely vertical with the tool, being that the tool is parallel to the axis, that's not going to make really much of a cut. It could on a pivot, but not much. So you're going to want to turn the tool a little bit, open it up a little bit, maybe 10, 12 degrees compared to what safe is. And I haven't introduced that, but safe is anywhere along the surface of the wood where you can place the tool and it's parallel to that arc. You can put your tool up here parallel to the arc. You can cut down here with the tool parallel to the arc. You'll be safe. You won't be able to cut, and then from there you turn your tool and you figure out how to pivot. That's a hard one. If you haven't done this, you won't get it. But that's for classes. There's a loose. There we go. And I'm really taking my time as I pivot. Just pivoting, cut, cut, cut. The other thing I've seen through teaching is a lot of people move their tool along their pivot way too fast. This is only moving at maybe 100 RPMs, 150 RPMs. It's really slow. So you're going to want to make sure to move your tool slow too. Otherwise you're going to cut a spiral in the surface. And again, it's going to create more problems than you're able to fix. Especially when you just start. So you can see I've been cutting along this area, but there's a void here and here. So I'm going to have to turn all that material down. But I'm going to go along the surface, just find out what I have. Reposition. so you can see.
Ty asked the question, on the return, do you disengage the hook slightly?
Slightly. You don't really need to do it if you're not pushing, you're not causing any friction. So you're just making a slight cut. You don't have to, and I would promote, if you're beginning, to not worry about that. People see it and they over exaggerate it, and it just causes, again, more movement and more problems. So I am slightly, but if you're just starting out, don't even worry about it. If you pivot slowly, it naturally happens because you've removed the material already. So I'm pivoting along, repositioning so that I can cut into the wood a little bit and almost out, repositioning. I normally would hold my tool like so, but I'm holding it back here just so that you all can see. And you can see this little ledge here. If I maintain the ledge the whole time, that means I'm not pivoting too fast, and I have something to cut against. It feels stable. It's like carving wood with a Sloyd knife without a shaving. You skip across the surface. So you maintain a little bit of a shaving, and then you have something to register against. More control. So, hollow spot. And the fibers are being pulled out a little bit too, which is interesting with this wood. The other thing is with the rim. Now, as pole lathe turners, we're bound to the pedal, and we can't move around. We're stuck. So with hooks, we're able to put the hook anywhere where we can make a cut, depending on its hook shape, because we have to stay put. So unlike electric lathes, where you don't want to deviate from the center axis too much, hooks can be used below center, even above center, although it's not really needed too much. But below center cuts are very common, and there's no danger because of the way the edge is oriented to the spinning wood. And at the rim, you can't pivot into the wood. The pivot's coming out this way. We need to cut this way on a pivot. The only way to do that is to go below center and pivot this way. But the risk is, as you pivot up, you don't want to turn your tool into a 90-degree approach because it'll catch. So you have to drop it down below center more and make those pivot cuts, or build a hook that has a specific shape that can help. This reverse grind hook, the edges here instead of here, allows you to drop that hook down to a skew. And you're able to cut and pivot without going into a 90-degree. Question?
Trevor Walsh wants to know about left-handed hooks and putting the headstock on the right side of the turner. Someone else asked, could you adjust the tool rest closer to deal with the later outer cut?
Later outer cut. I'm not sure what the later outer cut they're talking about is. If you can explain that one or reword it, I'll let you know. You can move this around wherever you need to. Trevor, generally, we just learn to turn left-handed, or right-handed, I mean. I'm not a lefty, but that's kind of the way it's been promoted. I've had some left-handed students in classes that built their own lathes, and eventually they kind of gravitate toward turning right-handed. You can do it though, but yeah, it's totally possible. You just have to build everything opposite.
He clarified to the outside edge of the bowl. Can you adjust the tool rest closer to deal with the outside edge of the bowl?
The rim?
Probably.
I don't need the tool rest to be closer. What I need is the right pivot position to be able to cut this area. Because I'm stuck in one spot, the pivot location doesn't change much by moving the tool rest. It's the shape of the tool and just dropping below center. It works just fine.
Someone wants to know if you can show the reverse grind tool, and is it a tip down hook, quote unquote tip down?
Yeah, it's a tip down. You'd think it'd be a tip down. I don't quite look at it that way because I use these tools running the lathe in reverse, which is for hollow forms and stuff.
It's hard to see it. It's in focus. Yeah, put it against something.
Here, oops. Let's scoot this one. This one's a better one.
Okay.
So the edge, it's tipped down. You use it tip down. I call it a reverse grind because normally it would be sharpened here and it's on this side. So I call it a reverse grind hook, not a tip down.
Okay.
Because you can use a lot of hooks tip down in different spots. So it's not the best way to categorize it, but it works as long as we clarify. So yeah, this is sort of the mind-numbing part for everybody. Just get to watch me turn.
Am I in the right spot or what?
Are you?
Do people want to see the cuts or?
It's up to you. You can do some far out stuff and then some close stuff too. It'll be a little while I do this.
Thanks, Ost Handmade. He's reminding us to save it.
Yeah. So when it comes to this type of turning, it's nice to have a lot of different hooks.
Oops. Sorry, people said it was a good spot and then I just moved. Oh well.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the best spot for anybody who's turning. But you can stay there and just just watch the pivot. Mm-hmm. And watch what I'm doing with the pivot location. And then when she switches back, you can watch the tool.
And in about 5 minutes, we'll start a new live. Does your leg ever get tired?
Someone asked that?
Yes.
My standing leg does. The pumping leg doesn't get to work hardly at all.
Depends on how short you are.
When you're first starting, maybe, but your standing leg is the one that gets the use. So you can see there's a big spot there that yeah, that's better.
People want to know what you're using for sharpening and what grit and all that.
It's the I'll talk about it in a minute.
And Ruben Godby wants to know if you have a special bungee or if it's just whatever bungee.
Just regular bungee, Ruben. I buy it from the hardware store by the foot. There's 7 strands, semi-stretched to the max, almost to the max. It's a DMT brand serrated knife sharpener, and you really only need the coarse grit. It wears out quite quickly, so it kind of turns into a fine grit as you use it. And then I also use Japanese water stones that I've cut and shaped with masonry cutting disc on an angle grinder. There should be some water in there, but there isn't any right now.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop.
Stop it.
Okay, and restart.
Okay, so check it out. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay.